Thanks for staying with us. So the Lagos State government has requested for an investigation into an allegation of medical misconduct on a popular chef, I believe, late Mrs. Peju Ogboma, as a result of her husband putting out a complaint about medical negligence happened in the hospital. I will refrain from mentioning the name of the hospital at this time. But the story we have, I think, from Premium Times is the fact that this woman went into the hospital by herself, a pre-planned selective surgery, which was supposed to be on fibroid, and she had actually planned for it. And then at the time, after the surgery, she did complain of abdominal pains. And that happened. And then I think there was, at some point, they were trying to...
They were giving her blood. They were giving her blood. She got pints of blood the first time, second time, but they said it was based on the fact that she lost a lot of blood during the proceedings. Yes. And they had to now get, because she's a B+, they had to get a specific blood type for her. And she kept complaining of serious bleeding, eyes turned yellow. I think the husband had to call a family friend who is a medical doctor in the UK who recommended the fact that there might be internal bleeding. And he raised the issue with the hospital, with the doctors that did the surgery. And according to him, they didn't pay attention to they ignored that it could be internal bleeding, to the point where she was almost like, she was almost gone, and then they transferred her to another hospital where they pronounced that they don't.
I think it was from last week they got the confirmation that indeed there was, I think
there was an
independent
autopsy
was done, an independent autopsy was done to confirm indeed. But as I said, there are still allegations, but we will mention the word hospital right now because the Lagos State government has instructed for an investigation. But there's also a similar case that happened in Ogun State about an Omolara. Mariam, you have that story.
Yeah, so this lady, she was staff of Lasema and a call agent, and she went to this hospital, Beachland Specialist Hospital in Ogun State. Her friend took her. She had a peptic ulcer, it says, and she was having difficulty breathing eventually. They finally got oxygen for her to use, but the hospital said they had only enough oxygen to last her 3 hours. Wow. And when it didn't look like she was getting any better, they transferred her to another hospital. But then they took her, put her into the car that would take her to the... So they didn't have an ambulance. The hospital didn't have an ambulance to take her to the next hospital. They asked the friend to get someone to take them there. They got someone who came at 2:30. They put her in the car, and then they took the oxygen away from her and told the driver of the car to drive fast. Jesus. By the time they got to the next hospital, she was pronounced dead by the time she got to the hospital.
So if we look at what is medical negligence, obviously, from definition, it's an improper, unskilled, or negligent treatment of a patient by a physician, dentist, nurse, or pharmacist. And failure to attend promptly to patient requiring urgent attention is also considered gross ineptitude on the part of the caregiver. So our focus today, as I said, it's a developing story. So when we talk about these kind of things, we try to bring in all the various parties. So we are yet to hear from the hospital. They've not made a public statement, so that's why we're still waiting for them to speak before we make this a full show about this. But we're discussing medical negligence across board because it's not a Nigerian problem. Medical negligence happens all over the world. Many people have traveled to India, to US, where they had issues. People forgetting stuff in their abdomen and all that. Somebody forgot cotton buds. Somebody actually, the doctor forgot cotton buds. So these are things that we're familiar with, but sometimes it's quite painful when it's so close to home. When it hits home, it's a bit different. So, in your view, what are your initial thoughts about these stories, especially the one that happened the two that happened this weekend? And how do you think we can begin to address it? Now, this has gone on social media. Everybody's talking about it now. That's why we are talking about it today. But what do you think can be done to help prevent more of these kind of negligent and behavior from our caregivers?
I think it's a very scary story, especially when it hits home, when it comes close to, or it happens to somebody you know, or it happens to you. And I know that doctors are human beings. Nobody's above mistake. But when you're handling the lives of people, there's a humility you should have that would enable you listen to other consultants and understand if they are making sense, if it's something you can look into. There's nothing wrong if those doctors had taken that lady back into the theater just to be sure that there was no internal bleeding. But you know, like you have somebody abroad and here, me, that I'm here, I'm a professional, I've told you what is expected. So why are you calling? So you don't trust me. Why are you seeking for a second opinion? And then you carry on like that and you see how it results. And if at the end of the day, they find out that it was actually internal bleeding, you can be sued. So aside from the fact that we know that anybody can make mistakes, I think when it comes to people who are handling the lives and, you know, lives of people, you should take extra care. That's one. Secondly, the other story is not just an issue of negligence. It's an issue of infrastructure, no day. Oxygen, no reach. They try to manage the oxygen. So as we give you small, so carry and driver, run fast, so that this one go day for the next person. So there are two heavy issues here that if you can sort out our infrastructure, if you can equip our hospitals, we may not have the second issue. But the issue of negligence, I think everybody just needs to be careful.
Well, so, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, how we do one thing is how we do everything. As a society, we do not value life. And it's played out several times, where a human being will walk with her 2 legs to the hospital, elected to do a surgery, and one mistake, one person did not do one thing right, cost the lives. But we tend to say that's how God wanted it to be. And that's another major problem we have. Yoruba will say, Amuwa Olorun, it doesn't happen without God's permission. And so we don't do autopsies, and we don't do investigations, and we don't do prosecutions. And these 3 things are how you check systems, because human beings will be lazy, we'll get like lackadaisicals. But when there are enough checks, if you do autopsy, if you do prosecution, if somebody dies in your hospital and you pay in such huge way, losing license, the hospital is meant to pay, there will be stiffer deterrents to that lackadaisical attitude.
You know, Tope, there was somewhere I read many years ago that in the US, it was in the 1950s, was the last time they had death she died of natural causes, because they started checking that every single death must be checked. You must know why the person died. Don't just tell me, there's a reason why something happened. Miriam, your thoughts on this?
So the thing is, many times when we talk about negligence or people bring out situations where they may have faced negligence, medical negligence in hospitals, there's always like a backlash, like, okay, we're professionals, we're doing our job, and sometimes these things happen. Oh, you brought the person quite late, so by the time the patient was in our hospital, it was almost over, you know, things like that. So it's almost always seen as if people are just coming for the medical institution. But sometimes I feel that if we can just step back a bit and just listen to the message, which is, let us just be careful on both sides. And if we demand more, if we demand more of the medical institutions, the medical personnel, if we demand them to be careful, they will in turn be careful. So this is what I mean. Instead of seeing it like, oh, they are attacking me, these people are going to ask questions. These people are going to want to know what happened. And so in carrying out my duty, I must make sure that I follow all the steps that I need to, so that when a time like this comes, I can defend it to, you know, the best of my medical abilities, or, you know, that I did my very best. The problem here is we have an attitude. We tend to have this attitude problem, which is you cannot question me. We complain about our politicians when we ask them questions. We see it in hospitals when we go to, you know, you go to a person's office, you get that sort of attitude where do not question me, you don't know what I'm saying. So it's important that we put that aside and look at how to just, it's a sad story.
I'll share my story of don't question me when we come back. After this break, stay with us, we'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back.
Thanks for staying with us. So as I said earlier, this is a developing story. We're still waiting to hear from the hospital so we can have a proper, nice, robust show. But I think Tope said it earlier that one of the objectives of this conversation is to understand why people die and prosecute where there's an issue so that we can check these issues, because this will keep happening if hospitals don't get prosecuted for their actions. I was going to share a story when I found out that the doctor that birthed me was alive and still working in the same hospital where I was born, which is St. Nicholas at the time. And I was so excited, you know, that, oh, yeah, so he let him also help me to birth my own child. So he did. you know, and I was going to him for my antenatal, and it was nice. It was, after I gave birth, I had a tear. So he sewed me up, and he really sewed me up, and I was in pain. I kept going back to him, sir, I'm in pain. Oh, you're okay, you'll be all right, you're all right. I kept going back, this pain is not normal. This pain is not, I kept complaining for weeks. It now went on to about 2 months. I couldn't bear it anymore. I was managing and stressing myself. Someone now told me to go to another hospital in Surulere. I won't mention the name of the hospital. I went there, this doctor was supposed to be really, really good with new births and all that. So I went to him, and then he checked. He said, who did this to you? Yeah. Oh my God, who did this to you? They sewed me up so tight. So he kept
nearly covered
covered everything. So he now started cutting up, and I was feeling relief. I was cutting up and cutting up and cutting up. I started feeling relief, and then I felt better. So I went back to the other man and said, sir, that pain, I saw a doctor in Surulere, and the man said, this is what happened. I said, hey, I was trying to help your husband now. I was trying to help your husband now because not after. And in my mind, I'm thinking, it's not as if he's negligent, but this is coming from the old school thing of, okay, let me sew you up properly.
It's not actually old school. Do you know this is a complaint that they're having right now, where gynecologists think that they can help your husband by giving you, I think it's a husband stitch, or there's a name for it.
Really?
To help you be smaller again, so that it will make the other room better.
I was trying to help your husband. I say help my husband. The husband will tell you that he needed help. So these are the kind of things that happen.
But my issue is that you complained about your pain,
and you were not,
and it wasn't addressed. That was what happened with this case. She complained about feeling pain. It wasn't addressed. They got another person's expert opinion to say, what could this be? Check. It wasn't addressed. So I had my own medical negligence story, and it's a hospital you know. I've had 2 miscarriages before in my life, and one happened right here in TVC. It was terrible. Like, I was bleeding all over Akiade's floor. And so they had to rush me from TVC to the hospital. And when I got there, I'm like, okay, this is my second. I've had miscarriage before. I shouldn't feel this much pain when you're doing the evacuation. I was in serious pain. I was saying, it shouldn't be painful. They said, we've given you the injection. I said, but I'm still feeling the pain. Like, I'm already feeling pain before. You shouldn't put me in extra pain. So they gave me more injection. At the end of the operation, I could barely walk. You know, like, they didn't confirm that the anesthesia had taken effect before they started the surgery.
Oh, my father.
So it was I was feeling every pain.
I cannot even imagine that pain.
And I told the doctor I was feeling pain, you know. So it was a case of, all right, we are done with the surgery. Morayo, for the next 3 months, I was bleeding.
Whoa.
Every day. So I went and I was saying that I shouldn't be. They said it's normal. After evacuation, you see. I said, no, but I've had one before. I did not bleed. And I went to another hospital, and they did an intravenous scan, and found there were still particles of the previous there. And so it was like, what's smelling? So it was a case of, if I did not check it in time, and we had to do another operation in another hospital, that's how somebody would have just gone. So medical negligence, when you complain, is seen as, no, it's a normal thing. You feel pain. Pain is normal. Or bleeding is normal. You don't check. Because you feel you are so good in your job, we don't check.
Let me take this call. Chukwuemeka, are you there? Chukwuemeka, you're live. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm calling from Ghana. My name is Chukwuemeka Egojan.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
So I had my wife had a similar case of what Tope just narrated. In 2018, my wife was pregnant, almost 5 months. And we went to the hospital. The doctor checked my wife and said, oh my God, that you didn't do sacrilege. You're supposed to have done sacrilege, this and that. Meanwhile, she was not spotted. There was no blood. And you can't believe it. The next thing, the man gave my wife a tablet. And I asked him, what's the use of this tablet? He said, just for pain. You can't believe it. He took me outside while my wife took that just for pain. The next thing, she started popping. Before you know, the water busted. I asked him, what happened? He said, I have to do that. That the baby was coming out. I said, he said he was going to raise her leg up. And that was what he told us immediately we entered. You can't believe it. And that was how we lost the baby. Then again, in 2019, she was pregnant again. This time around, I decided to go to a bigger hospital. If I mention the name, you'll be shocked. In Nigeria here, I paid so much. At the end of the day, the head of gynecology said, we are going to do sacrilege to your wife. And they did sacrilege. And at the end of it, at 5 months plus, almost 6 months again, they gave her another injection again. She lost that baby again. We have to go back to that hospital. They removed the sac latch, and my wife went through pain. I saw her, see my wife going through that pain. From day to today, I refuse to allow my wife to conceive. So if you have any problem apart from malaria and typhoid in Nigeria, you're your own. All they do is they are messy. All the hospital did was to call me in one of their rooms and start to apologize and beg I shouldn't take action.
Thank you, Chukwuemeka, for this story. I mean, I don't want to call it a Nigerian story.
He didn't take action.
But so...
We don't take action.
It's not that, oh, we are coming for you, this particular hospital. That's not it. It is for all of us to learn that there are procedures. Yeah. There are procedures to doing some things. And if you fail to do it, you have to explain why you did not do it, how it came about. And then if other hospitals, doctors, practitioners are aware that these questions will be asked of them, they will do better. Like my mom, when I was going off to secondary school, you know, you were at boarding school, she would say, whenever you go to the hospital and they're going to give you any injection or any medicine, always ask the nurse, please, what exactly is this? So she said, it's not because you're trying to tell off the nurse or tell her job. It's because it will also give that nurse the opportunity to look at what she's giving you one more time and be sure. So as she's reading it out to you, she says sometimes these people are tired. They've been up many hours at night. They think they're taking something. But when they stop and they're able to look through and ask, you know, and then they're able to tell you, it's better. And I noticed that as I grew older, the older nurses did it easily. You know, you'd ask them, please, how do, even before you'd ask them, say, I am about to give you this, how many meals? But the younger nurses that I came across, I'm not saying all of them, but some of the ones I came across, you would see almost irritation on their faces, asking? Like, why are you asking? You know?
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up on this, but I think the objective is to start the conversation. As we said, investigations are still ongoing, and we're going to keep monitoring this story in particular. And hopefully, we're going to hear from the hospital, probably get somebody from the family to talk to us, and other people, so that we have a full understanding of what transpired, and then try to see what measure we can take to ensure it doesn't happen again. That's pretty much the objective of this conversation. That's all we can take. Thank you very much for those who have called in for your contribution. Let's go on a break. When we come back, we move on to other hot topics. Stay with us. We'll be right back.